Hi, everyone. Um, do dogs and thick hogs and everyone in between. Um, this is going to be interesting. Um, I don't really know where to start. This just is such a weird experience. I know we've done a couple episodes in the past where one of us had to do oops, no episode this week by ourselves. But I've never actually had to record a full thing. I guess that's not true. We did a Q&A, but or an AMA, but this is weird and this is hard, and I just don't know. I don't know where to start, and I don't know where it's going to go, and I don't know what the entirety of this will be, but I feel like there's stuff that I need to say, and there's people that I need to reach out to and thank, and that there's just so much that needs to happen. And for some people, this might be the easiest way to do it. And so I'm just gonna do this, and I'm gonna just go and ramble as long as I can. I guess I don't know. Um, I don't want this to be some big sad thing. I want this to be a mixture of things. I want this to be emotional and positive and a lot of different things all at once. Um, so I'm just gonna start, and we'll see what I get up to by myself with no adult supervision. So before I start doing anything, I'm just obviously I'm gonna start with some other, just let's call it house cleaning, or housekeeping. Um, so yeah, it's been man, almost 3 months, and a lot's changed, and a lot of things are different, and um, there's going to be a lot of things going forward that are going to be different for a lot of people, myself included. And I'm gonna get a little bit more energy here, because I don't want this. I said I don't want this to be a sad podcast. I want this to be something that's a little bit more. I'm gonna try to be upbeat as I can be. So first, I want to say it's incredible the amount of love and support, both financially and financially. The community. I mean, people listening to this, maybe people who will never hear this. I don't think Scott's family really realized how much he really meant to people and how much he connected with people. I think the amount of money that was raised on the GoFundMe blew them away. I think it really just kind of shocked them, in a positive way, obviously, because I think they knew about the wrestling, they knew about the podcast, they knew about streaming with Adam, they knew sort of a bit about his life, but I don't think they realized the as we've been, my inner group has sort of been joking, the minor internet celebrity that he had become. I don't think they really knew that part of him. So seeing that is just incredible. I mean, even I was blown away. I mean, we reached the original goal. We made it in the first day, and I'd been mostly dealing directly with Scott's younger sister, and her and I had conversations about, do we bump it up? Do we just leave it? I mean, we've kind of gotten to the point where we're going to get like this is what we need. Blah, blah, blah. Do we just cut it off? And we just kind of decided, like, let's just keep it up. If people want to keep giving and donating, and, like, the last thing we want to do is say, okay, we're done, no more money, please. And then people who didn't get to donate might feel left out or feel like they didn't have the opportunity. So we kept it open, and I think it just blew everybody's minds, like, how fast everybody really, like, reached it in their pockets, and, like, everything helps, like, $5, $10, $20. I mean, they're everything. So if you did donate, don't feel like you're like, oh, my $5 or $10 didn't mean anything. Like, please don't think that way. That money very much went to helping Scott's family with funeral services and celebration of life services and everything that really needed to go with that. So yeah, please don't feel like you didn't. If you're feeling weird or guilty or whatever, please don't feel like you didn't contribute because everything was important towards his family. And then if you didn't donate or you couldn't donate, honestly, please do not feel bad about it. Do not. Are you recording? Yeah, you were recording this whole time, you stupid thing. Um, Sent me messages and sent me their, story to appreciate it at the time or like really connect with people. Um, it it really put me in a weird position because I'm not that I'm not capable of being social, but I'm not really the kind of between people or with plans or anything like that. So it put me out of my stories or just anything, and I didn't respond or I didn't to read that or ever going to respond to you. Um, that's definitely not the case. I to people. It's not that I don't want to do that. It's just I don't have that kind of energy or battery or light your thoughts and your comments and everything. I mean, I don't want you to feel like it's not appreciated because it really is appreciated. Um, but like a lot of it was um, overwhelming. And like I said, I'm not that kind of a social human being outside of, my very close group of people. So, yeah, so I do appreciate it. I can't say enough about how much you guys, everybody listening, everybody who's ever listened to an episode of the podcast, anyone who's ever watched our wrestling live or online, who's done watched Adam's streams or our great friend at Drunken Peasants who had Scott and I on, and if you've ever seen him do any of those things, I appreciate you so much for all of that. You've been incredible. And it's been it's been nice to know that he meant so much to other people because I mean obviously he meant a ton to me. I know it sounds I hope this isn't offensive to people who've been in this situation, but like it honestly does feel like I've lost a part like a partner, like a husband or a wife. Um, it really does feel like that. I've had so many thoughts daily that I just, like that was the only person I would say things to or share things with or have the same interests of a certain thing with, and not having the person um, to put that out there to a person, like to share and express, has been an incredible challenge for me. So I guess a couple of things that I wanted to talk about before I get into what I'm actually going to talk about. Number one, right before before I completely forget this point, Scott was a lot of my go-between for people drawing art of us. And sometimes I didn't know who made specific artwork, or if he did, I had forgotten, or it might be in our group chat or our chat log on Telegram, which not that I don't want to go through and look through everything, but we literally were sending 100 messages to each other almost every day. So if you're seeing the logo of the podcast right now, it was a piece of artwork that I really liked. And if you were the one that drew that, please tell me, because I honestly don't know who did that. And if you did draw art for me specifically, or both of us, but me specifically, if you could just tell me that like, even if you just message me on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, and just say like, hey, this is what I drew for you, just so I know who did it. There are some obviously that I know the person. Shout out to Edgy Berserker, who drew us artwork that we got turned into a shirt. And there are other people who I know did certain things, but if you drew the picture that I'm using as the logo for this, please reach out to me, because I don't think I actually know who did it. And I want to give you credit, and I want to thank you personally, and I want to ask for your permission to use that as a logo for this or whatever I end up doing going forward. So that was first. So secondly, that I want to talk about is, and I don't want to get this again. I don't want this to be a sad thing, and I don't want this to be negative at all. But honestly, like, let's have a real talk here about mental health. The last couple months have been, understandably, very hard for a lot of people. Some obviously his family, his closest friends. It's been real hard, and I know it's been hard for everyone. And I've been feeling incredibly stressed out, and I have had a lot of anxiety, and I've felt incredibly depressed and sad and lonely, even though, let me preface that by saying that I have support. I have people in my life that have been there for me, and it's not like nobody should be concerned about me, being in that state of mind. I'm okay. I'm healthy. I'm trying my best. I'm keeping myself as busy as I can. I've spent way too much money buying movies, because buying movies is how I deal with stress. And then the fact that I'm depressed and I don't have the attention span to watch said movies, has been kind of a sad point for me, because I feel like I'm not enjoying the things I used to enjoy. But I've really just been internalizing a lot of things, and I've been very antisocial. And I know that there's been quite a few of my closest friends that I've been not intentionally ignoring their messages. I just don't have the energy or the false front of feeling like I want to have a positive conversation with those people, or that I want to interact with them. Some of it is very much like, hey, just how are you doing? And I it's not that I don't want to express myself, because honestly, being a grown man, I'm not necessarily afraid to express my emotions for the most part. I know a lot of people do struggle with that, no matter how old you are or what gender you identify as. But I know specifically as a 38 year old man, um, I really don't struggle necessarily with expressing my emotions. Um, and so this has been a very difficult change in my life where I have people that I genuinely love and love talking to and love spending time with that I just can't socialize with. I can't. It's hard to put on that fake face and that fake emotion of like pretending like everything's okay. You know, like for the first little while, it was I really had to do it because I was so just lost. But as things have sort of calmed down, like, okay, well, calm down's a bad term, but as things have sort of become less hectic in planning things and being and getting things out there and making sure this is set up and making sure this is done and just all of these responsibilities as they've sort of started to die down, I think I've had to really, I mean, I've started to grieve a lot more, and I've become much more of an introvert than I've ever been. I mean, I am an introvert. I don't go out and do social gather. I don't like doing social gatherings. Not that I can't do them. I just don't like to do them. I'm kind of a homebody, or I just like doing things with my partner or with a friend of the podcast, Kelly, Caden Delbane. Like that's I like that stuff, but I've become so much more of an introvert where I don't like going out. I don't want to socialize with people. I don't want to be around people. And it's made me just kind of like full of anxiety and I've been I'm a classic overthinker. I've probably said that on the podcast in the past. I'm a classic overthinker. And so everything just gets to me and I just can't I can't deal with like a day-to-day situation with people. And so, I've just felt lost and I felt like, I'm depressed because I don't like the things I used to like as much. And I miss my friend. I miss doing the podcast, even though, to be honest, sometimes I felt like it was a chore, because I'm spending one of my days off doing the podcast, even though it's spending time with my best friend. And there's a part of it that is financially supportive of me, and I'm connecting with people. There were times where it definitely felt like a chore, like we had to do it. So I had to sacrifice one of my days. It's so stupid to look back at it now, because it's like, if I wasn't doing the podcast that day and I was just hanging out with Scott in general, but because we have to do the podcast now, all of a sudden it's an inconvenience. So it's so dumb, but like, yeah, I miss that. And going to wrestling and just going out for spending too much money eating out on the 2 days we would see each other a week, and going, talking about movies, watching wrestling. Like I can't really focus on watching wrestling anymore. And I struggle with, unless it's a movie I really want to watch, I definitely struggle to get through things. Despite what my letterbox may appear, because I have been watching movies, because it's keeping me, it's hard because I'm trying to focus, but then that I can't focus, and I just don't know, really what to do with myself a lot of the time. So there's been days in bed where I don't want to do anything, and I just can't really stay focused on anything. And so, mental health is just such a severe issue for a lot of people. And I feel like I've dealt with it for a lot of my life, but a lot of it was just feeling lost. I feel like when I was younger, I felt like I didn't really know where I was going or what with my life or what I was doing with my life. and I definitely had this weird, I had this weird obsession when I was like a teenager, that I had to have a girlfriend and I had to be with someone. And the only way that people would think I was cool or that I was like a fun person or a normal person was if I was dating somebody. And I was so focused. I spent so much of my time just being focused on that. And like thinking about it now, like it didn't matter. None of that mattered. But I would like, I would stress myself out and just depress myself so much about like, you know, being single and being lonely and being a loser and not having anybody love me. And then as I got older, that kind of went away. But then I started getting concussions from sports, and it came back like different but worse. So like I just didn't have a motivation. I think that's kind of the main thing, is just like feeling like I don't want to do something. Like I value my free time, I value my alone time, and I value time with my partner or with my, you know, my parents or whatever. I value the time. But I always feel like if I'm, you know, if I don't spend my Saturday watching movies, playing video games, eating whatever I want, being in my own space, I'm going to regret that on Monday. And that's not great for your mental health when you're like, you're missing out on life opportunities and interactions with people because you're like, I need to do this for myself. And I think once I started kind of getting brain trauma, I suppose, that I felt like a lot of times I was struggling to be happy, even though I'm doing the thing I wanted to do. You know, like I could play video games from like 1 p.m. in the afternoon until 3 or 4 in the morning. And it's what I wanted to do, right? Like I wanted to do that, and I wanted to spend the whole day playing it. Maybe not till 3 or 4 in the morning, but I wanted to do that. But I felt like I wasn't happy, even though it's what I wanted to do. And so that was a real struggle for me. Once I started to get a little bit older, in my mid-20s and then into my early 30s. And, you know, like it definitely leads to dark thoughts of self-harm and of, you know, thinking that, you know, the mentality that everybody would be better off if I wasn't here, and everybody would be happier if I wasn't around, and I'm a burden to people and I'm not doing anything important, so why does it matter? And, you know, like the fact is that none of that is true. None of that is true. I mean, there's going to be things in your life that are going to make you sad and make you feel like you're not gonna be important, or that people don't care about you. But the fact of the matter is, like, you just have to do what's best for you and don't care what other people think about you, or what the expectations are of you, or what the expectations are for the future, right? You just have to do what you need to do to make yourself happy, make yourself healthy. And it doesn't matter if you're not the perceived... I've lost my train of thought because the stupid recording is skipping, and I may need to make sure that it's not doing the thing it always does. Now I just feel like I was rambling and I lost my spot. It wouldn't be this podcast without one of us losing our train of thought and just rambling off into nowhere. Yeah, do the things that are important to you, and you know, if you need help, talk to somebody. If you have family, if you have close friends, please reach out to them. Tell them what's going on. Don't be afraid, because the thing is, what you're thinking is making, oh, I'm one in a million. I'm the only one that feels sad about this, or anxious about this, or upset about this, or whatever. Guess what? Everybody else is also feeling differing levels and symptoms of those things. So if you're really struggling with something, you can tell people. You know, if you don't have a person that's that close to you in your life, then there are places to reach out to people and actually find them. I think September is Suicide Prevention Month, I believe. And if you really are struggling with something, you can go to places, you can talk to people, you can get the support and the help that you need. There's massive communities of people online that are there to support you. They're not just trolls. They're not just there to bully you and make you feel worse. There are people out there that are actually positive people in your lives, and they care, and they want to make sure that everybody's trying to get through these problems. And, you know, I'm starting to feel better. I'm starting to kind of focus more on getting back to the way I was. I mean, it's not going to be that simple. It's not going to be a quick flick of the switch and then I'm going to be back to, like, you know, saying slurs and being fake racist and being fake but real sexist. You know, like, it's not going to be that simple. So I think there is support for people who need it. So please go out and find support. Please go out and talk to your family, talk to your friends, and tell them what's going on. Don't be afraid to share what's going on with you. You know, you're not alone. There are people there, and they can help you. So that's what I'm going to start before anything happens. That's just what I want to get out there. So please take care of yourself. So now that I've gotten the sort of important thing out of the way, I'm gonna do a couple episodes. I'm gonna do 2 episodes that is just me telling you the journey and the story of mine and Scott's friendship. And I'm going to record them as 2 episodes because I have no interest in editing anything or cutting anything, or I'm going to apologize in advance if the audio is dog shit, because I let Scott do everything, and, you know, he had the time and the kind of focus sometimes to do it. So I apologize if this sounds like crap or it's not up to the normal standard of what a Worst Year of Our Lives episode sounds like. But I'm going to do it in 2 parts. That way I can just upload one and then I can record it. You know, I don't think I want to do 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours, or whatever it ends up being, of just talking about everything all at once. You know, like, I think I want to give myself a break in the middle and kind of reflect a little bit more and then do the second part. And then I want to do a 3rd episode after the 2nd episode is out, where I'm just going to open it up to people's questions or whatever they want to talk about with me, about Scott's life, about our friendship, about, I mean, pretty much anything, I guess. Anything you want to know or have questions or concerns about. Obviously, like, you know, keep it tasteful. I'm not going to talk about specific things, but that's kind of the game plan going forward. I don't know if I'm going to do, I mean, it's kind of up to you guys, I guess. I don't have any kind of very specific goal in mind. I obviously can't do the exact same kind of podcast because, you know, it's just, I'm never going to replace Scott. I'm never going to be able to get that level of friendship and camaraderie and genuine connection with someone, even other friends of mine. I'm just never going to have that. So I don't know if I plan on doing more podcasts or doing more episodes of The Worst Year of Our Lives or any of the same format. But I mean, if you people, you know who you are, want to keep listening and you want me to do something, I'll try my best. I don't know what it'll be. I don't know how much it'll be worth listening to if it's just me, but, you know, depending on the feedback and depending on what this kind of does, maybe we'll see. I don't really know. I do kind of intend on, I've been talking about doing streaming for a long time. And as Scott used to always say, I'm a gamer. So I'm going to finally bite the bullet and start trying to stream NHL 25 to start. The pre-release is the 27th. I'm recording on the 10th. Um, and I'm probably going to put this up tomorrow on the 11th, which I'm fully committed to making International Scott Henson Day. But I'm gonna do that. Would be the podcast without drinking noises. Yeah, I'm gonna start streaming NHL 25. I do have a Twitch channel. It's twitch.tv/SarenSoftPause. And then also the YouTube channel that you're listening to this on, because it's the only way that I have to do it. And I really struggled with doing anything. I felt guilty. I still feel in immense guilt because there's been so much attention put on me because of Scott's passing, and like I never asked for it. I don't want to piggyback off of his legacy or his life or his support or supporters or anything like that. Like I feel so guilty about even doing like certain things. Like I feel like this is going to be the first step to test the waters. I know I did Drunken Peasants for Ben because he's my friend and he asked me to, and he was going to talk about Scott anyways, and so he felt like it would be important for me to be there, and I did it. And Adam and I we're like friends by association, but we were never friends. We didn't talk, we didn't hang out. We would socialize when Scott would invite me to go see a movie that Adam was also seeing, or, very other like minor things. So Adam and I were never friends, but then of course when Adam was going to do the stream and he asked me to do it because he said that it, obviously it makes sense for me to be there and talk and give information and my perspective and all that stuff. I did it. And to be honest, I was not ready to do either. Mentally, I was not there. And I think if you listened or like see the stream, Adam's stream, there's definitely long periods of time where I'm silent and not talking and not, like I wasn't emotionally ready to do that. And it's not Adam's fault at all. Like I'm so glad that Adam asked me to do it because, it made sense for me to be there. But yeah, I just was not ready to do it. And same thing with Drunken Peasants. I just was not ready to interact and talk and pretend like I'm a minor internet celebrity who's out there just doing his regular thing. I felt so guilt-ridden about it because I felt like I was piggybacking off of Scott's legacy and even like, I did another podcast or another stream podcast thing, whatever, that was to talk about Scott, but I felt so guilty, just like I shouldn't be doing this. Like, it's not about me being on this thing. I mean, he would have been extremely excited about it. But it was a wrestling observer, but like he would have been so jacked that I got to do it and talk about him. But like, I just kept feeling like, I'm only here because of him. I'm not here because I deserve to be here. I'm here. And so like, then I feel like I'm getting fame and credit off of him. And it wasn't the right time to do any of that stuff, but it's, it's never the right time, and things just come at you real fast. And if you don't do them right away, then you miss the opportunity or whatever it was. Right. And I feel like I needed to be like a focal point, a front point, because I was, his best friend and his tag team partner and his podcast partner and travel partner and, all that. So I felt like I had to get that out there and talk, but I was not ready. And so now, this whole thing, I don't want to use the fame we got from the podcast to stream NHL 25. I probably play, and I know it's not for everybody. Let me get there right away. Like, I know hockey is not number one priority for a lot of people. And I totally get that. And I will eventually do other things. I don't just want to be a one note kind of guy. I'm very bad at a lot of games. So I think what I'll end up doing is I'll just play games I'm really bad at and you can see me be bad. But I want to start with NHL 25 because I honestly play 900 hours of the game between when it gets released at the beginning of October until the beginning of September the next year while I'm waiting for the next game to come out. And if I'm going to play that much of the game, then I should probably just record it and put it out there. And even if 10 people are watching it, that's more people than watch me do it normally, and I'm totally fine with that. And I'm not here to say, if you liked The Worst Year of Our Lives, you should come watch me stream hockey video games. But if that happens, awesome. If it doesn't happen, I'm not going to be all sad and mopey that nobody wanted to come listen to me or watch me or whatever. It's going to be there, and then that's it. So yeah, it is up to the people who used to listen to the podcast. If you want me to try and do stuff, or I'll take feedback, I'll take ideas, and we'll see where it goes from there. So yeah, that is my plan as far as that goes. Yeah. So let me crack a drink like we normally do. Drinking a Rockstar Punched Orange Swirl, which is the Canadian version of the orange cream one that is in the United States. And I'm so glad they got it in Canada because it's one of my favorites. And since I haven't been going to the US, I couldn't get it. So here we go. And don't worry, noted friend of real life and the podcast, Chris Goodwin, I won't directly drink it into the microphone like you hate so much. Mouth noises. So I'm just going to start at the beginning. And I'm going to go until I run out of steam, and then we'll do the second half at a different time. So I grew up in a suburb of Vancouver. I grew up in Coquitlam, and Scott grew up in Southwest Marine, which is South Vancouver, towards the University of British Columbia, which is about 50 minutes. A 50-minute drive southwest from me to him. So theoretically, there's no reason that he nor I would have ever crossed paths in our lives. This guy's 3 years older than me. He went to a private all-boys school. I went to a regular public mixed-gender high school. And literally no reason for us in our entire lives to have ever met or connected with one another. We were so far apart from each other, age difference. So getting to meet someone that you would have never had in your life and then becoming best friends with them, I think it's pretty unique, especially because we were already almost adult. Well, he was already an adult. I was almost an adult. In the eyes of the law, not emotionally or mentally, because I'm still not an adult. Just ask most people in my immediate life. So I had a friend in high school, brag, Mike Arboit, doxed, who wrestles locally here as Dance Daddy De Niro. And in high school, I was friends with Mike, and I was friends with Kelly and our friend Rory and a couple other people, and we all liked wrestling, and we talk about wrestling a little bit. We did some trampoline stuff and, just the usual things you did in the early 2000s. And Mike had been wrestling with some guys who had a ring in a backyard in Surrey, British Columbia, which is about, I don't remember exactly where the ring was, but it was like 30 minutes southeast-ish of me. And Mike said, why don't you just come out? Why don't you come, meet these guys and get in the ring and wrestle in a ring? So I I remember obviously I remember the exact date and time. So on myself and my friend Tyler and Mike all drove to Surrey on um, October 31st, 2004 at 12 noon and arrive at what looks like a kind of standard middle income 2-story house in a suburb. And from the outside, it looked pretty normal, like there was nothing going on. And walk around the corner of the house to the backyard, where you realize that the backyard is completely overgrown. There is a full-sized wrestling ring set. I think it had already been set up by the time we got there, but they usually took it down and put it in the. It wasn't really a garage. It was like a side storage area that, like there was no entrance for a car, but it was big enough for a car. And the house was completely abandoned. And I think the story I was told was that the people who owned it used to work for, like, the guy who lived in the house was like a referee or ring crew maybe for one of the local companies in Vancouver. And they had been storing the ring there during the winter or something. And we were kind of borrowing it from the guy who ran the company, who was one of Scott's trainers, I believe, or like would go on to be Scott's trainer. Or no, I guess at that point he'd already been trained. Yeah, so it was Scott's trainer, and they would set it up in the backyard, and then they would just have shows on a Saturday afternoon until it got almost too dark to wrestle, and then tear the ring down and put the ring back in the garage hole thing, and then just kind of do that as they could, and so like before I knew of Scott, they had been wrestling on what is called a base in wrestling. So you just take old mattresses and tires and plywood and like that carpet padding stuff, and you just sort of like build a ring but without posts and ropes, and it's at about ground level, and it's just called a base. And so they had built a base in a backyard, or in a like next to a house off of the highway in Burnaby in the woods. And that's where they had been wrestling before I met them. And then Scott and our friend Dan had actually gone and gotten trained in a ring for one of the local wrestling companies in Vancouver, ASW, and or All Star Wrestling. And Scott wrestled under the name of Jimmy James, which is a shout out to one of his favorite TV shows and characters from News Radio, which was played by Stephen Root. And that's... I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted again by this stupid thing. Okay, good. So they had their first couple of matches, and then they just continued to backyard wrestle. So we show up, and the ring is set up, and there's, I don't know, maybe like 16 or 17 people there, of which I only knew 3. And Mike had told me ahead of time, oh, bring $5. And we're like, oh, I'm like, okay. And so Tyler and I bring $5. And then he goes, oh, just give it to Scott. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So here's this guy, this kid. I mean, we're young, right? Like I was 18, Scott was 21. And I remember he was standing there talking to our friend Kyle, and at the side of the ring by a shed. Scott was wearing basketball shorts and a Hawaiian t-shirt, or Hawaiian shirt, as he did for many years before becoming a Tiger. I know, peek behind the curtain there, but he wasn't always a Tiger. And I walk up to him and I said, hey, I'm here to wrestle. Here's $5. And Scott said, cool. And that was it. That was the first interaction I ever had with Scott. I don't think I talked to him at all the next time. Not even not next time. The rest of the show, I don't think I talked to him. And so I had my very first match in a ring. It was 10 on 10. I did 2 things and that was about it. And so the rest of the show was what was called a deathmatch tournament. So death matches in wrestling is a lot of like ultra violence and, kind of more dangerous things. You got light tubes, thumbtacks, barbed wire, blading yourself so you bleed for real, ladders, tables, chairs, like, the unsafest parts of wrestling, but intentionally. And none outside of maybe like 2 or 3 of the people that we wrestled with, nobody was really into that. But I think it was just a kind of a gag, like funny thing, like, hey, what if we all did a deathmatch tournament? So that was the rest of the show. It was my 10-man tag match where I did almost nothing, and a series of increasingly more violent death matches. So I remember a couple things from it, but not a whole lot. The first things that I can remember are there was 2 guys that fought each other almost like kind of shoot style a little bit, that ended up brawling out into the front yard and across the street into somebody's yard where somebody yelled at them from the window to get off their property, then fought around to the side of the property where the house was, which involved somebody getting slammed into like a big shrub that hurt and then suplexed into a mailbox. Then I remember Scott having a death match. One of our friends had brought their sort of like, I don't know how to say this in a nice manner or a politically correct manner, but I'm going to try. A plus-sized gentleman whose ancestors would have lived here before the whites. And he wasn't a wrestler. I think he had done a handful of matches that were just sort of like garbage throwaway, like nothing, just because he was there. And I think he was, in a nice possible way, lower on the IQ side, but not so low that it was a crime. And Scott agreed to have a death match with him. And again, not noted deathmatch wrestler Scott. Kicked his ass, beat the crap out of him, let the guy hit him with 1 light tube in the back, which didn't really do anything because Scott's wearing 2 shirts and, it doesn't really go through. And Scott put a light tube in the guy's butt crack and then got out his wedge and with a golf club and said the line, "Don't mind me, I'm just playing through," and then swung it and broke the light tube into the guy's butt. And I turned to my friend Tyler and said, I don't know if I want to wrestle with these guys. I don't have a lot of interest in doing deathmatch wrestling, and these guys seem kind of into it. Again, I had no idea that this wasn't the thing, that it was just like a gag. And also the ridiculous thing is that later on in my life, I realized how much I like doing death matches. So what a weird thing to kind of both sides of these turn around. But I very much remember that. And then after Scott's match, I think Mike had to go home and Mike was our ride. So we left. And after that, somebody almost died. And I didn't know that. And so the only way that we communicated at that point, I think, obviously some people had each other's phone numbers, like Dan and Justin and Scott and Kyle and blah, blah. But like the rest of us, it was all on, there was Scott had a website, or I guess still does have a website, is bluethunder.com/VCW. And there was a message board on the website. And the message board was sort of how everybody communicated with one another. So that was the only way to find out about shows. I mean, for like the rest of the roster was, we'd be like, okay, like this Saturday we're doing it. So you go on there and find out. Well, I really wanted to wrestle again, but I don't remember the exact situation behind it, but like Mike couldn't go, Tyler didn't want to go, and I couldn't remember what the website was. So instead of just asking Mike what it was so I could get an account and log into the message board, I just assumed that there was a wrestling show every Saturday. So I convinced my dad that I wasn't going to wrestling and got him to take me to the SkyTrain. I don't remember where I told him I was going, but I wasn't going to wrestling. Got him to take me to the SkyTrain, which is our above ground rail subway. And, 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, I take the SkyTrain from Coquitlam into Surrey, get off at the end of the SkyTrain, and just hope that somebody's there to pick people up, because I knew that was the spot. I knew that was where where people got picked up. I don't know how I knew that, but I knew that. And I went and I just hung out there for like 4 hours, just waiting to see, because again, I had no way of logging into the website. I didn't know. I mean, I should have just asked Mike, but I didn't know if anybody was actually coming. So I waited. Nobody showed up. I went home, and then maybe the next day I might have asked him. Anyways, I get on the message boards eventually, and then I connect with people, and I, kind of decide I really want to wrestle with these guys, even if they're always going to do death matches, which again, they didn't always do death matches. It was just that one show. So the next time I go out there, I have a singles match, my first singles match in a ring, and I did a bunch of stuff that, I don't know, like somebody who hasn't been wrestling theoretically shouldn't be able to do, like springboards and 619s if anybody's in the know. And I remember afterwards, like both Scott and Dan is coming up and being like, I can't believe you can do that. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't realize it was such a big deal. And they're like, yeah, like you're springboarding in the middle of the ropes. And I was like, where am I supposed to springboard? No one's ever shown me. And so it was, I think that point they were kind of like, okay, like this guy can kind of do some stuff. But again, I wasn't friends with any of these people. I was only friends with Mike and Tyler, who both like didn't really want to go. Well, I mean, I think they were just both busy, but also like Tyler didn't really want to go anymore. So I was by myself. And at a certain point, I don't know if the house was getting sold or the house was getting torn down maybe, or just like it wasn't a good situation to leave the ring there anymore. Like, I don't know the logistics of it, because the person that was living in the house, the ring crew guy or the referee guy or whoever the hell it was, just like didn't live there anymore, and no one lived in the house. So the house was abandoned. So at a certain point, we had to leave the area. And the last show that I went to was some people whose names will not be said out loud because I don't want to get them in trouble, decided to have a match where they fought into the house and brawled and put holes in the walls and did all this like ridiculous stuff. And somebody, again, who will remain nameless, wrote on the walls I think in blood, maybe, "My landlord sucks" on the wall. And somebody took a poop in the middle of the basement and just in the middle of the floor and just left it there. Anyways, so we moved the ring to an actual venue in Surrey. It was a boxing ring. I think they maybe did MMA, but it was like early on in MMA. And so I think it was mostly boxing. And we were there for like quite a significant amount of time. But, by this point, it's like into 2005. Maybe like towards the middle or end of 2005. Like I didn't go for a little while because I wasn't in the group. So I didn't actually know really like how to connect with everyone other than just the message board. So when I started going back, we were in that building, and that was when I kind of started to become friends with Scott a lot more. But the thing with it is that like, as much as it was all of us backyard wrestling and like, living out our childhood dreams and goofing around and having fun, like a large percentage of it was everybody was there to hang out with Scott. Maybe not everybody would admit that, but that's definitely what it was. It was very much like we're all hanging out together, but Scott's kind of the leader and he's kind of the one organizing everything. But like everybody just wanted to be around Scott. That was kind of like the big thing. Sorry, it was sippy time. Um, so I didn't actually really become like friends with Scott until like 2006. So like 2005, like I wasn't as consistent with going because I was I was still kind of focused on hockey, even though I was like way too old to like make it or be anything. But like I really wanted to keep playing hockey at like a competitive level. And so I was. And so a lot of the times I would have to choose like going to practice over going to wrestling, or I'd have games so I couldn't go to wrestling or whatever. And so I didn't really hang around that much in 2005 until in 2006. But then like, the summertime was when we all sort of started to like really, some of the guys who had been around for a little bit longer, like weren't coming around anymore because they had like jobs or they just didn't really want to wrestle anymore or whatever. So when the group started to get a little bit smaller and we all started to get it like closer, is when Scott and I think kind of realized we had like a very similar style of humor to one another. And that's when we sort of like gravitated more to actually being friends who would talk outside of the message board and outside of seeing each other at wrestling. And our group had gone down to maybe like 10 regulars and then like 4 or 5 like very irregular, like, maybe once every 5 shows or something. But then, then the hangouts actually started to happen where, 5 or 6 or 7 of us we would all go see a movie, or we would all go play mini golf, or we would go to this thing or that thing. And then, then we're all hanging out like as friends, not just people that are backyard wrestling. And, we would all, Scott had is it a green RAV4? Was it a RAV4? Do I even know cars? Is a RAV4 a viable option for Scott to have had in 2006? I'm going to say yes. I'm not a car guy, but I feel like Scott had a green RAV4 that we would cram 7 or 8 people in, because he was one of the only people that had a vehicle at the time. And so in order to get from like wrestling to the SkyTrain, or the SkyTrain to wrestling, or from wrestling to the movie theater, we would just jam into this thing, like so uncomfortable. But like he was the chauffeur for like the whole group, because he was the only one that had or maybe one of the only ones that had a car, and the ones that had cars didn't always come. So, that was kind of the big thing, was that we would go hang out after wrestling. Now, maybe me not as frequently again, because I thought I was going to play hockey. But eventually I kind of started to learn more like, oh, like Scott's kind of a big deal, like in the internet backyard wrestling community. Like, I mean, so was Dan, so was Chewy, but like everybody knew Scott. And like, I didn't really realize that when I'd first met him. I just thought he was like a guy who was renting the shows. And like, if I'm being honest, like I looked at Scott and I was like, well, this guy's not really athletic. Like he's kind of like stocky, and he's kind of skinny arms, skinny legs. He kind of looks like a nerd. Funny that I'm saying that, because like I was a nerd, but like, I look at him and I was like, he seems like the kind of guy who plays badminton. And then guess what? Scott played badminton in high school. So, but like I didn't perceive him as like, oh, this guy's like a good wrestler. And that's when I kind of learned like, oh, like he's got this pretty big like internet backyard wrestling fandom. And we started having guys that were like his friends, are like, that group of friends. They would come from like all over the United States. And we'd have some people come from the UK, and people that would come from the other side of Canada and Australia. And they would all come up here for like, just like for weekend shows that like weren't even, like we're wrestling in an MMA boxing gym that it was literally just for us. It wasn't for like an audience or a crowd, or like, yeah, we would put it on the internet so that people, our wrestling friends could see it. But we weren't doing, it wasn't this big grand spectacle of like thing, like it was really just us doing it for the sake of doing wrestling, and we wanted to hang out and do wrestling. And then you have people spending like $500-$600 to fly from, St. Louis or Tennessee or Pennsylvania or Ontario, or, more than that, to fly in from the United Kingdom or from Australia or whatever. But it was all just to hang out and be a part of the group. It wasn't that like, I'm going to go to Canada and I'm going to wrestle in Vancouver and I'm going to, put that on my resume and it's going to make me seem like a better wrestler. Like it was, it wasn't that. It was legitimately to hang out. And, every time we would come, and there'd be sometimes one or two people, but like they were there to hang out with Scott and everybody. But, Scott was like the main feature. But then, we had super shows where you'd have, I think maybe the most we had was 20 people from around the world that flew in, and we did like a 2-day or 3-day show with just like all these people in the gym. And it was honestly just about hanging out, and wrestling was just a thing we were doing. And Scott was the leader. He was the one that was organizing the plans and figuring out who was staying with who and how to get people to and from the airport on what certain days, and who was arriving and who was leaving, and, figuring out where we were all going to eat as a giant group, or how many cars we needed to get people from A to B. And, he was like the den mom, the den mother, is that what it is? Or like, the sorority mom. He was kind of the one that was organizing everything and keeping us connected and hanging out and spending time together. So it wasn't just people coming here. It was people going there. So Scott traveled quite a bit to go wrestle. Again, this is more about hangouts than anything, right? It's a community of friends that have one common interest, sometimes more than that, that just wanted to hang out together. And that's kind of a lot of what it was. So, Scott went to Rhode Island. He went to Ohio. He went to Pennsylvania. He went to Illinois, New York, more states that are on towards the East Coast and the Midwest, Tennessee. He went to the United Kingdom. He got to experience wrestling with his friends in more of the world than you would think, considering we weren't technically professional wrestlers yet. We were backyarders, and we got to go to all these places and hang out with our friends and see all these different things in the world that you wouldn't normally get to see if you were just a regular Joe. And, he really got to just showcase himself to a lot of people that already knew who he was and already knew what he was able to do. But it's like seeing it in person is much different than seeing it online, like he did have this like big persona about himself. Like his presentation was like enormous, and he really did kind of make the whole room focus on him. He was very good at like making sure that you knew it was Scott time. I don't want that to come across negative, but like he was really good at like, hey, it's my match, so shut up and sit down and look at me. And I think everybody wanted to watch him wrestle. I mean, not like every single match was good, especially when we're backyarding and we're younger. Like lots of things just, they don't really work out, or they just don't look good. And a lot of the heat, as you call it in wrestling, which is the crowd reaction, a lot of the heat, if not all of the heat, was the boys, right? It was all of us who were watching that had to do the clapping along and like playing the part of the audience. And, not everybody was able to, I mean, 100% for me, I was not that guy. Like when I was younger, when I was in my early 20s and I was wrestling with these guys, I wasn't the one that was in the ring and like, like getting people to clap or make noise or like pay attention. Like, like the amount of shows that we would do and I would go to, and like I was there live for this event, this match happening, or this big thing, but like, was I even really paying attention to it? You know, like, was I just standing there talking to people and, you know, just sort of when, oh, everybody's clapping now, okay, like I'll just like clap along, or, but like, how much of it was I really paying attention to? And Scott was always the one that was like, hey, like, shut the fuck up, I'm wrestling. And then he, you know, or like, okay, not in those terms, you know, like in a, I'm saying he was able to get the crowd to pay attention to him, even though it was the boys, even though it was his friends and it was the other wrestlers that were there, because there was nobody else there. He was still able to like draw people in to pay attention to him. And that's pretty wild for backyard wrestling, that like you can command that kind of attention. And it's really interesting to like that's the story. Like that's, you know, he lived such a unique existence. Like, you know, there's a very few people in this world, you know, like that aren't professional wrestlers getting paid, you know, big indie money or big professional money, that really have this like life story of traveling around America and a little bit of the world, mostly on your own dime, or almost exclusively on your own dime, and getting to like, you know, how many people have been to Shamokin, Pennsylvania, or how many people have been to Bridgeview, one of the two in Illinois. I can't remember exactly which one it is. You know, like not very many people get to go to like small towns in the middle of nowhere and wrestle in a backyard with just your friends. Like that's its own unique thing to, you know, maybe 5-6 people in the world. So he got to go all over and do the thing he loved, which was wrestling. You know, like I never pictured him as doing anything other than wrestling. You know, like when I first became good friends with him, and I realized like, oh man, he like knows a lot about wrestling, and not just like WWE, WCW, ECW. Like he knows like a lot of history of things and times and dates and where, you know, like connective stories and in wrestlers. But I was like, man, like I like wrestling, but like he really likes wrestling. And you know, like before streaming and before the podcast and before all that stuff, it was like, yeah, like I can't really picture him doing anything other than wrestling. You know, like that's what's his thing. Some people have like a couple things, or like a few things they dabble in, or like, yeah, I like to wrestle, but I'm going to school to do blank. And then you're like, oh, okay, so you'll do this until you get to a certain point, and then you'll stop wrestling, and then you'll get like, you know, you kind of think of that for a lot of people. You know, Scott, like I never thought it was like wrestling. Wrestling is the thing. Even when he had a job, which I get to later on, you know, like wrestling was the thing. I'm like, that's what his life is wrestling. And, you know, there's guys in the professional ranks who have been wrestling, you know, as long as as he had, or, you know, longer. And you're like, they have a very different story. You know, they've been on national television. They've been on pay-per-views and, you know, seen by millions of people. And then Scott's got to wrestle, you know, his dream and wrestle in all these places. And it's just such a unique story. And there's so many people that are like never going to get to know anything about that. And I think that's difficult and like weird that now we're the custodians of Scott's story. You know, myself and Dan and Justin and Kelly and a few other people like that. You know, it's weird that we're the ones that sort of are like carrying on that story, that legacy of like where he'd been and where he had gone. And I mean, a lot of it I wasn't there for, to be honest. Like I didn't really travel with him until like, God, what was the first trip that we went to? Yeah, I mean, like I went to Chicago with him, or Bridgeview or Bridgeport, whatever the fucking one it is. And I went to Cooperstown, New York, and I went to Clarksville, Tennessee, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And are those the ones that I've been to with him? Yeah, I think so. I don't know exactly what the first one was, but it was later on after he had already done Rhode Island, Ohio, Pennsylvania, a different time, um, the UK and Australia. God, I feel like I'm just rambling, and I'm only an hour in. But yeah, so Scott got to go to the United Kingdom, which is pretty cool. But I mean, I think one thing I'm happy about is Scott and Dan and Chewy going to the United Kingdom, like, connected us with some actually some great people, people who are really great friends and awesome people to have in your life. And maybe we wouldn't have had that connection with them if it was just based on the internet, the amount of people from the UK that have come to Vancouver to wrestle with us is crazy. It's the halfway across the world on your own dime, sleeping on somebody's couch or on an air mattress on the floor of somebody's house, or for a weekend or 10 days or whatever. And, you don't get that from just a regular life standpoint. And so the fact that they went there and they met all of our we got an incredible group of friends that live in the United Kingdom, and that's huge. How would you ever meet these people? You would never meet these people in your life, and now they're connected to you forever because of the reach that Scott had as a backyard wrestler. It's incredible. I love my friends, and I'm so glad that Scott brought everybody together to sort of be in each other's lives. And I mean, we have Australian friends that, had come here. I think one of them had come a couple times, and then a few came once or twice. And then, just all of our friends in the United States that we would have never met without backyard wrestling. And, he really did just bring the community closer, because he was such a beacon for being social and being inclusive and being fun and being outgoing and everything. And, yeah, it's just it's crazy that he got to do all these things. And, yeah, I'm, there's part of me that's kind of jealous. There's definitely a part of me that's I really wish that I could have gone more. And at the time I was younger, and I didn't really care that much. But now, I missed out on all those years of travel and trips and being in that presence of those stories that I've heard for years of, the Deppen brothers trying to kill each other in the backyard while their mom watched, certain things that I'll never gonna get to, the award show. And I believe it was in Rhode Island with all the hilarity and ridiculousness that they did and everything. Those are just stories that I got to hear from him, and I kind of am bummed that I missed them. But I one of my favorite things is that Scott, I mentioned earlier that Scott was not a death match guy, right? He didn't do death matches, but the Aussie folk, they like it. And we have a couple of friends that live down there that are very much deathmatchy guys, or at least one for sure, and the other one I think just kind of was sort of guilty by association. So they were doing a deathmatch tournament, and for whatever reason, they decided they really wanted Scott to be there. And Scott was I think he kind of jokingly said yeah, I mean, I would come if you guys would if you guys flew me down, yeah, of course I'd come. And guess what? The Aussies put their money together and they paid for Scott to fly to Australia, which is hilarious. I mean, if you know Scott, it's very on brand. That I don't know exactly how old he was or what year it was. I mean, if you ever want exact data and information on certain things, Daniel Makabe is your go-to. And I'm sure if Dan ever hears this, I imagine he's very much right now saying the exact time, like he's got it nailed down. And Dan, I'm sorry that my brains are mush and I don't remember things. And also I'm aware I could easily look it up, but I also don't want to. So he got flown to Australia in his mid to late 20s and did a deathmatch tournament. Granted, he did one match and then pulled himself out of the tournament because I think that was sort of the agreement or the gimmick that he was doing. But I mean, people paid money to have him fly across the world to kind of do nothing just because they wanted to be around him, right? And that's wild. And so he went down there. I don't know if he had met most of those people before he got there. I think he just knew of them or had maybe like communicated with them online, but I don't think he had actually met any of them in person unless any of them were in the United Kingdom, like had gone to the United Kingdom, but I don't actually know. No, that's actually not true. Our friend Siege had flown from Ontario, I believe. And he had gone there. So you knew one person for sure. And then our friend Luke went, whatever. But my favorite story that he ever told me about it was, so he was staying with our friend Rusty. And I'm not exactly, like, I don't know the specifics, but whatever city he was living in at the time was like 2000 and, if I had to put a date on it, and Dan, don't scream at me, it was like 2012 or 11, 12, 13, somewhere in there. And I think he was living like in the like a suburb of a major city in Australia, but it wasn't like the best as far as like development or like modern amenities. I think it was like pretty standard, like up and coming area that has most things but not everything. And Scott was staying at Rusty's house, and I believe it was Rusty's family's house, like his parents and everything. And Scott there was a New Japan Pro Wrestling pay-per-view that was on had occurred overnight that night, or maybe the night before. And so Scott had set up the computer I guess it must have been at Rusty's house because Scott didn't have a laptop to take with him. So, but he went on the computer and he went and set the torrent up to download overnight so that in the morning he could get up and watch the New Japan pay-per-view that had happened previously. And so success, it worked. Scott got up. I believe he watched the pay-per-view or watched most of the pay-per-view. And then they continued on with their trip, their whatever. And Scott got home. And after he got home, he realized, I guess Rusty told him that, the way that the internet worked, either in that part of Australia or in Australia as a whole at that time, or just from the internet provider that his family used, that Scott had used up the entire month's worth of bandwidth for their internet connection to download the New Japan pay-per-view, and it was like maybe the middle of the month. So now they had no internet for the rest of the month, or they had to like overpay for the extra, and he felt so fucking awful that he had wasted their entire internet to download what I believe he said was an only okay New Japan pay-per-view. But I mean, he had no idea, but that was just part of the thing, is like, he really wanted to watch the pay-per-view. I wish I knew, like, I wish I could look it up and then watch it on New Japan World just to see, like, was this worth wasting an entire family's internet for the entire month? I bet you it wasn't, but yeah, so like he did the tournament, he met a bunch of people, and then later on, like, a bunch of those people came to Vancouver, and we ran a different show up here, and we did move around. We did move buildings quite a bit after a while, because I think the guy who owned the original boxing gym we had moved into, maybe had some legal troubles, or he was moving, or he had his rent bumped up, and we didn't want it, I don't remember, but we were sharing the ring with the other professional wrestling company in the town, and they were doing their training and student stuff there. And then we were just doing our shows on the weekends. So we moved from Surrey, and then we moved to Port Coquitlam, and then we moved to a different part of Port Coquitlam, and then I think, did we move back to Surrey? I think we moved back to Surrey. Anyways, we had a bunch of different venues, but we would always run like one big show, pretty much one every year, maybe one every 2 years, as it kind of moved on, where we would just have people flying in from wherever and wrestling and having fun with us. And we would go to Boston Pizzas, we would go to White Spots, that were like wherever could hold a group of 35 like professional wrestlers. But it was never about the wrestling. It was always about hanging out. And, like we would go to, there's a place called Castle Fun Park that Scott loved, where it's got like, in like arcade stuff and pinball stuff. And, I think 2 mini golf courses, and like that was like kind of the cool hangout place for us, except for it's incredibly out of the way, especially when you have to take like 20 people or 30 people, because it's like, I don't know, like an hour east of me. And if people are staying in Vancouver with Scott, like it's not exactly ideal, but that's what it was about. Like it wasn't necessarily about the wrestling. It was about like traveling across the world to hang out with your friends is really what it was. And it kind of blew up from. So there was a certain point where we thought we were done wrestling. We had moved to a building back in Surrey, and God, do I have my fucking timelines right? No, we're in Port Coquitlam. It doesn't matter. None of this matters. Also, I'm not even sure if anybody's listening, so why does it matter if I give specific details on where anything is? We thought we were done. I don't really exactly remember why we thought we were done. I think it was maybe because we had gone from like, 10 or 12 or 14 people down to like 6 at times, and it was really hard to run shows because like one person had the referee, one person had to do the camera, and then like the other 2 people would wrestle, and then the other 2 would be crowd. And I think it just kind of got to the point where like we would maybe be able to have 2 matches on the show, and we were just kind of like, oh, okay, like this, this isn't going anywhere. Like some people were starting to get hurt and injured, and we just decided that it was maybe time to like stop, put away our childish things and move on and be adults or whatever. And we ran a last show. It was like super emotional. We had some people come in from out of town to be on the show, and we did this thing, like, a big emotional goodbye at the end. And I'm glad he's here. I mean, I'm glad I got to share that with my friends. And it's funny that Scott's not here right now to defend himself, because at the end of the show, when I think I refereed the main event, I believe, which was him and Chewy ? So like they have this big emotional moment. They hug, and then Justin starts crying, and then, despite what he would say, I looked at Scott and he started crying first, and then that made me cry. He would say he looked at me and I was crying, and that made him cry. But I am here to state the facts that Scott Henson cried first and I cried second. So I remember specifically sitting on the top rope in the referee equipment, shirt equipment. What the fuck am I talking about? And they hugged in the middle of the ring, and I was perfectly fine. And then he turned around and he had water in his eyes, and I was like, uh-oh, I am in trouble. And so Scott cried first. Let it be known and stated, and he can't defend it. So we were done. We thought we were done. We thought we're moving on. We're never wrestling again. And that was it. And then like 6 months later, we were like, fuck, we shouldn't have stopped wrestling. Like, we missed this too much to just quit now. And so we decided we were going to continue, that we were going to keep going, and whatever it took to make that happen, that's what we would do. And so we I don't remember. I mean, I don't remember the specifics of it, but the other wrestling company that we had been sort of at times sharing the ring with had put their wrestling school in a warehouse in Surrey, and we decided like, okay, like let's start wrestling again. But we, collectively, I think we had decided that VCW, which is what we were Van City Championship Wrestling, was the name of the wrestling company that we had. And we were kind of decided that look, we put that to bed. We retired that. We stopped wrestling. Like, we shouldn't just come back as VCW. We should do something different. And there was a Zach Galifianakis joke that we thought was comical, and decided that we should just do something stupid. So the Zach Galifianakis joke was that he saw a custom license plate on a car that said, "I sucks dicks." ISUXDIX. And it stands for I sell use Xerox digital interface Xerox. And we're like, that's a pretty stupid joke. But maybe we can play off that. So I think, I'm not sure the conversation was between who, but there was a discussion on what it could possibly be. And so we decided to name our company I Sucks Dicks, which stood for the International Society of, spelt UV, Extreme, starting with an X, Dudes in Extremeness. And that was how we decided to come back into existence. And that was not only the one joke that we made, but we also made our heavyweight championship belt called the I'm not going to say the word. I'm going to say the words, and you figure out the acronym. So it was the Champion of Men, again spelt UV, Men, Fighting and Grappling. And our tag team titles were called the Partners United, Solid and Strong, Yearning for a Rumble Tonight. You do the math. And so yeah, we picked up pretty much where we were. We still only had like 6 or 8 people, but we kind of made it happen. We were in a warehouse in Surrey that half the warehouse had been divided on one side by like somebody's business. We could only use only one side of the ring was open to the floor. The other 3 sides, 2 of them were, up within 6 inches of a wall on 2 sides. And the third side was where the chain link fence that divided the ring from the guy's business went. So we could only use one side of the ring to enter, exit, do dives, put the hard cam, have everybody sit and watch the entranceway, the music. Like, we had such a tiny little small space to actually use to do these shows. But honestly, it was the most fun we'd ever had doing wrestling, because we didn't take it seriously. Like VCW, we definitely tried to take it more seriously as far as like doing wrestling, like let's learn how to do all these crazy moves, these big impactful moves, these dangerous moves. Let's learn how to do them, and then we'll just have these like New Japan, All Japan, Noah style wrestling matches. And then we get to I Sucks Dicks, and we're just like dicking around, literally. We're doing backstage promos, and we're doing like vignettes and video packages. Like, we're doing way more like acting and sketch comedy and goofing around and just having fun doing it while also wrestling. But a lot of the wrestling was more like, let's just have fun. Let's not try to kill ourselves. Let's just goof around. And we'd never had more fun in our lives. And like Scott and I would always say, like, can you believe we thought we were done wrestling in 2011? Like, can you believe that? Because how we really genuinely thought we were done. We thought there was no other way. Like, we're done. Everybody's beat up. Nobody wrestles anymore. Like, nobody comes. And yet, we wrestled for another 13 years. And it's just crazy to think that that's where it got, like we were done, everybody. And then we just immediately came back. So we did that for a while. And then again, I don't remember the exact logistics because my brains are bad, but we were, the ring and the building just like weren't available anymore. Like we weren't going to be able to use it. So we decided, okay, like let's do the last I Sucks Dick show. We had run them as like seasons of a TV show, and Scott did the most editing he'd ever done. He was putting in graphics and in intro musics and intro videos and all that stuff. And, he really like took a little bit more time to have fun with it. And we ran a couple of like big super shows, one a year for a few years. Just like all of our friends would come in, and we rented out a church gymnasium in Richmond, and then we rented out a church gymnasium in Burnaby, and we did some shows there, and we almost watched a man die once. And that was just sort of where we were at, and we weren't really sure where any of it was going. And I don't think the intention really from anyone was to go be professional wrestlers. I think maybe when we were younger, there had been some thought about it, and a few of the people, a Tony Baroni type and a couple other people had left to actually go do proper training and started wrestling for the professional companies in Vancouver. And I don't know that it was ever really our thought that we were going to do professional wrestling, because I feel like to us, and especially like, Scott and myself and Kelly, that like we looked at it kind of as like, I don't want to do wrestling that I'm not in control of. Like, I don't want to do dumb, like what we would perceive as dumb shit. Like, and I if anybody hears this and I'm going to get in trouble, obviously, because like it's not a positive thing, but like ECCW and All-Star Wrestling in Vancouver were like, to us, were dog shit. There were good wrestlers there. There were good people, like people that were competent or good or excellent wrestlers. But like a lot of them had like the old school mentality of like, big guys, or the way that you work the crowd, or like, oh, don't do those moves. Like, that's flashy shit. Don't do that flashy shit. And for us, we were like, well, like, I'm not interested in doing that wrestling. I want to do New Japan stuff. I want to do like Dragon Gate stuff. I want to do like what the modern Japanese wrestling is. I don't want to do 1980s territorial wrestling. And so I don't know that it was ever really like in our like trajectory to be like, I want to wrestle professionally. But we, over the course of time, we had, over the years, we had met some friends who wrestled in Washington State. And they had a ring in a backyard a couple times, like different locations. And one of our friends, Richard, had bought a ring. And we went down and wrestled a couple times. I actually got my first concussion wrestling in a backyard in maybe Shoreline, Washington, maybe. Got kicked in the head by Nick Price because he blasted me with an enziguri. Anyways, so we'd met them, and then, some of them over the course of time, we had become like very close with and very good friends. Shout out to Cody Redfern. And they had sort of met up with a different crew of people in Washington who were doing performance art wrestling, like on a stage at a bar, which to us did not sound appealing. I'm not fake wrestling on a wooden stage at a bar, like does not interest me at all. But those people and our friends who we had become friends with, kind of connected with one another and decided that they were going to like start putting on actual wrestling shows in Seattle. And we didn't really have anything else to do. We had done our big once a year shows in Vancouver that, we had to pay. Well, some people had to pay for the venues and for, rental costs and ring costs and whatever. And we would do them. But like, we didn't really have a specific game plan on what was next. So we now kind of have an option, and I'm not sure if I don't know if I ever really asked, but like I don't think it was really Kelly or Dan's intention to wrestle in Washington. I don't know. I guess I should ask them. But like I never really expected them to. I think Scott and I just kind of were like, I don't know, let's just do it. And if everybody else wants to come and wrestle, like that, cool. But if not, like it's whatever, we'll just do it. So we got invited to come down. I believe we got invited to come down one point and we couldn't go. I don't know the situation why we couldn't go. We couldn't make it. And then that show got canceled. So we were like, oh, okay, cool. We didn't even miss anything. And they moved that show back to 20. So now we're in 2013. And oh man, 11 years ago. That's crazy. September 20th, 2013. I technically had my first professional wrestling match in a ring in front of a like decently sized crowd. I think there was maybe like 150-ish people. I unless the American government's listening, got paid to wrestle in the back of a biker club with several very sketchy looking bikers. I don't think they were HA. I think they were something else. It was like a regular warehouse that had been like cleaned and painted. And then the dressing room was the like office that was at the top of this big flight of stairs that probably max capacity was 6 or 7 people. And there was about 15 wrestlers all getting changed in this one little tiny office. And we entered down the stairs to the ring. And, Scott and I, we had our first match together. It was pretty cool it was the first time I'd ever wrestled in front of a crowd. And I just remember, like, even though, in later years that I'm sure more of you people, you know who you are, you're more familiar with us being a team as cats, but we actually had spent so much of our time being rivals over the from 2011 until when the right before the pandemic, that we'd spend a lot of our time wrestling against each other. Sort of started as me as a baby face and Scott as a heel. And then that kind of went for a while, and then Scott turned into a face, and then I turned into a heel. But I was very proud of that match because I'd never wrestled in front of a crowd, but Scott and I had such good history and chemistry. And, we'd had a couple of big matches at our, the once a year big shows we did, that we were just kind of able to talk through real quick. Like, do you remember this spot we did? This is this. Okay, well, let's just do that again. And then afterwards, I don't really want to expose a lot of it, but I mean, it's whatever. It's wrestling. When you put matches together with people, it's a lot of trying to figure things out, talking things out. What move do you do? Okay, I wonder if I can transition this move to one of your moves, or like what's something you don't do, or what, hey, if do you want to take this move like that I do? Do you want to take it? And like, oh no, like, oh, I don't feel safe doing that. Okay, well then let's do this. And but like with Scott and I, like we never really had to do that. Like we knew the like 4 or 5 moves the other guy did. Let's just do them, right? And so we were like, hey, this connects with this very nicely. Bam, there's one piece. This connects with this. Let's counter it and blah, blah, bam, click. It's like, so we put together I'm reading on Cage Match. We put together an 18-minute match in about honestly, I feel like it was like 15 minutes that we talked it through and put it together, performing in front of a crowd for the first time in my life. And like, it went incredibly well. The crowd was super into it. They gave Scott some random girl to come down to the ring with him, who later turned out was a lady of the night that they had just like, I don't think it was the actual company. Like, I don't think, was it 3-2-1 Battle? I guess it was technically 3-2-1 Battle who was running the show. I mean, it was the first show with those people, but I think she had maybe like, oh man, I wish my brains weren't so mushy and I could remember things specifically. I believe she came with one of the other wrestlers on the show, but like not like in a like I've hired her as my lady of the evening, but like they came together and then she was like, "Oh, I'd like to be on the show." And they were like, "Hey, who wants a valet?" And of course Scott's like, "Oh yeah, I'll take one. Yeah, whatever. I'll take her." So she comes down with Scott. She had like little kitty ears on, I believe. And not to say she wasn't nice, because I feel like she was kind of nice, but she was unfortunate. And Scott was like, I think he was just jazzed that he had a mascot, a valet for the evening. And I mean, I'm sure he would have been real jazzed if he had a mascot for the evening, but there was nothing wrong with that match. It was so perfect. We didn't blow a single spot. Like, it just flowed so perfectly. I believe I wrestled in a Kiss shirt, because even though I was maybe the skinniest I'd been in a very long time, I still didn't want to be shirtless. I don't know why. Looking back at it, it's so fucking stupid. But like, yeah, I really just remember being like, I'm gonna leave my shirt on. And that was kind of like the first step we took in professional wrestling. I mean, Scott had his first couple professional matches in 2003, but like nobody saw those. Those are the Cloverdale Rodeo locally, and like, you know, nobody cared. Like, they were young guys wrestling on the start of the card, right? Like, whatever. But now, you know, like, we were really like, man, like, this is kind of addictive. It's really something that we didn't think we would ever have, or like maybe never even thought we really wanted. Like, I knew growing up, like as a kid, when I first got introduced to wrestling, and I know Scott felt the same way. When I first got introduced to wrestling, I was like, that's my childhood dream. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to be a professional wrestler. Although for a while I wanted to be a professional hockey player, but I wanted to be a professional wrestler. And I just never thought it was like, who thinks something like that? I mean, the amount of people, you know, the population percentage that are professional wrestlers is like small, right? And, you know, a kid growing up in the suburbs of Vancouver, there's no Vancouver professional wrestlers. Even now, there's only a handful. But like, we both didn't think that it was like going to be our thing. And then we did this match and we were like, huh, like maybe this is. And it just kind of went, you know, like up and up and up and up from there. Although granted, the next show we did together, which was the next 3-2-1 Battle show, although in between, we did wrestle in Clarksville, Tennessee for our friend, Steve. And it was a very interesting situation because we legitimately went to Clarksville to hang out with Steve. And the wrestling was just a secondary thing. And it did, like, the show, like, not to say that we didn't care or we weren't going to try or we didn't, but like, the show was completely secondary to us. And we just wanted to hang out with Steve because Steve had come to Vancouver a few times and hung out with us. And we'd seen him, well, Scott had seen him at other shows on the East Coast, but like, it was just about hanging out with Steve. It did not matter about the wrestling. And we had a great time. And we went to a Nashville Predators game and we got to take a picture with Nash, the mascot, the saber-toothed cat, which was fucking awesome. Although it's a terribly bad quality picture. I don't even know I guess it was Scott's phone, but like, it not great quality, but we still got to meet him, which was pretty sick. And so like, literally as soon as we walked in the building, we were like, we have to find the mascot. And then like 10 feet from us, we're like, there he is. And we ran over, we're like, Nash, can we get a picture with you? Like, you know, like little kids. But yeah, like, so the next show we did actually for 3-2-1 wasn't until like the beginning of 2014. So like they didn't really have like their foot in and settled in until the beginning of the year. And it was in a different building. It was underground in downtown Seattle. It was like barely any people. I think there was like 30 or 40 people there. And the way that the building was situated was the like dressing room area was 2 floors above. So like the second floor from ground level and the third and a 2 floor difference from the basement. So we couldn't see the ring. We couldn't watch anything. And you also just like couldn't really hear your cues or like, I don't specifically remember anybody like coming up and saying, oh, like, okay, next match, like you're on deck or whatever. So like none of us knew what the hell was going on. This isn't really Scott related, but this is just like me being a son of a bitch. I had started teaming with Daniel Makabe. We were the Rain City Coalition, and we were feuding with Fur and Loathing, which was Scott and Kelly. And Dan and I had, I think it was just me being intentionally difficult, which as anyone who's listened to this podcast has learned, I love being intentionally difficult. And Dan and I could not agree on entrance music. Dan very much cares about music and the music he comes out to. And I very much cared about being annoying to Dan. So we couldn't agree on music, and I was jokingly getting very stubborn about a very specific song, and Dan was like, okay, well, like I think we should use this. I like this. How about like I believe the argument was more like, okay, fine, just like pick a song. I don't care. Like pick one of these songs, and I think we had narrowed it down to like. Maybe two from him and 2 from me. But like, I don't think he specifically liked any of mine. And I think I maybe liked one of his. I kind of like the one we ended up using. That was one of his, but I didn't tell him that. And so, I jokingly told them that we were going to come out to Phil Collins' Susudio. And so the funny thing is, I told them that, and then I had forgotten I told them that. So Dan and I are waiting to enter. I don't remember if Scott and Kelly had already gone or they were coming out after us. But so the music plays, and like neither Dan nor I move. And then like it took me a couple seconds to realize like, oh shit, yeah, this was me playing a prank on Dan. Oh, Dan, that's our music. And he was like, are you kidding me? So we came out to Phil Collins' Studio one time, and then Dan was less than impressed, and we came out to whatever the song that Dan chose was that ended up being our theme for the extent of our tag team. But that's just me being intentionally difficult and a real son of a bitch. Anyways. So we did some stuff like that was just a continuation of our 3-2-1 or our I Sucks Dicks stuff. Scott and Kelly were the tag team champion. They were the Partners United Solid and Strong Yearning for a Rumble Tonight champions. And Dan and I were feuding with them, and then we ended I Sucks Dicks, but we wanted to continue that on, so we did some stuff at 3-2-1 that involved those title belts. And did our big feud, and the matches kind of like, I don't want to say we're the only good matches on the show, but one time a fan came up to us and told us that we had the greatest North American indie match that he had ever seen. So I'm thinking we were good. And we did a big kind of like several show feud from the end of 2014 into April of 2015, which in a match where it was for the tag titles, and I believe it was Anything Goes. I don't remember. Anyways, we did like a big payoff match for the tag titles, Scott and Kelly versus me and Dan. And towards the end of the match, we had set up a table outside the ring, and one of Scott's moves was You sunk my battleship, which is like I'm on his shoulders in a fireman's carry, and he throws you up, like he pushes your head and upper body up and around his body, and then you tuck under his arm and you land on your back and he lands on his ass. And that was one of his big moves. And we were going to do that from the apron to the floor, through the table. And the apron is like, on most rings, is not very wide and doesn't give you like a good base, but the 3-2-1 ring was like pretty wide. Like they had really, it was, I think it was like a boxing, like a boxing or kickboxing ring that could also be used as a wrestling ring. So it actually was like pretty soft and cushiony. Like it was a very nice ring. We got real spoiled once we became professionals, because we've been wrestling on rings that were rock solid and like hurt like a son of a bitch, and had vinyl tops, and like it sucked. And this is when we're like, oh, this is like the nicest ring I've ever been in my life. So Scott gives me this move from the apron to the floor. He lands perfectly, and like I moved perfectly. I did the whole rotation and everything, but I guess he just jumped. I mean, it's not his fault, but like I think he just ended up jumping a little bit further forward than he had planned, and I landed, instead of kind of like flat, like my upper and mid back through the table, and of course there's like padding on the floor. I actually kind of landed like really high on my like up my shoulders and upper back. And when I landed, my lower back swung down pretty fast, missed the padding and hit the cement floor. And as soon as I hit, like I'm like, oh, I'm in so much pain right now. And so the idea is like, take me out of the match. In the story, take me out of the match. Scott goes back in the ring, and then now it's kind of Dan by himself fighting off Kelly and Scott. And then at the end of the match, I come back in and help Dan, and then we win the tag titles. That was kind of the idea. Well, like I can't get up. Like I'm down and out. But I'm not putting blame on anybody, because it's, this was 2015 and it's 2024 now. But like the referee wasn't trained, so the referee didn't come and check on me. And obviously Dan and Kelly and Scott are in the ring, and they don't know that anything's gone on, right? Like, because I'm supposed to lay on the floor until I have to come in and do this spot. And so I struggle my way to the ring, and like, I can watch it. Like there's video footage of it, and I can watch it, and I don't remember doing that at all. Like I do not have any memory of getting in the ring, but I pull myself up into the ring, and I get in, and the next spot is it, does Scott run at me or Kelly run at me? I don't know. Somebody runs at me, and I'm supposed to do this move that is called it's a Boston Crab, but Chris Jericho used to do it, and it was called the Lion Tamer, and I was calling it the Tiger Tamer because I was feuding with Scott. And so I get Scott into the position I need to be in, but I literally can't stand straight up and down, and I can't pull backwards. So he's like laying on his chest and face with his legs up in the air, and I'm just kind of like standing over him holding them because I can't bend and I can't lean. Match ends, Dan and I celebrate, and then I get down to the mat, I get to the floor, and I realize like my legs are completely fucking numb. I can't really walk. Dan and I get to the back, and then Scott and Kelly come through, and I'm in so much discomfort. So what had happened previously was Dan had broken his foot at wrestling, and in Washington, and he had to go to emergency. And even though we all had traveler's insurance, which as a Canadian means that, if you get injured in the United States, before anything happens, before a doctor touches you, before you get in an ambulance or anything like that there's a number, like usually they give you a card. You call the number, tell them what's up, and then they're aware of the situation, and then you can put a claim in and blah, blah. Even though Dan had traveler's insurance and he did everything correctly, he had still gotten like a bill from the American hospital for everything he needed to get done that night. And actually, like in the full story, it actually took several years before they actually like that actually got resolved. But at the time, you know, Dan was dealing with like this thing, and I was like, there's no fucking way I'm going to an American hospital. And especially because I knew it was bad. So I was like, I don't care. Get in the car. We are driving back to Vancouver. I'm not going to an American hospital. I will go to a hospital at home. So we get in the car. We stopped at a gas station and bought like a big ass bag of ice. I put it between me and the seat and just was in like excruciating pain the whole way home. And I don't know why, but I didn't want to go home to my parents' house. I think because I was afraid my dad would yell at me. So I ended up sleeping on the couch at my girlfriend's house, who lived with her parents, because I knew her parents wouldn't yell at me. And I slept on the couch. And in the morning, I got up and I called my mom, and I was like, you have to take me to the emergency room. Like, I can't walk, and I can't stand up straight, and I also can't sit down. And my girlfriend at the time's mom was a nurse at the emergency room, or in the hospitals, but she worked in the ER. So we go to the hospital, and like, again, like I can't stand up straight. I can't sit down. And takes forever to get in, because it's just the way that our healthcare system works. Yes, it's free, but also they don't have enough doctors or nurses. And I go into the doctor, and he like could not have been bothered or cared any less about me being there and being in pain. Like, I told him what happened. I said, I'm a wrestler. I like hit the floor weird, and now I can't bend over. I can't stand up straight, and I can't sit down. And he just kind of looks at me and goes, okay. He, like, I swear to God, he touched my back with 3 fingers in 2 places and went, yeah, I think you got a slip disc. It happens. And he's like, you're a pretty big guy. And I was like, am I? I feel like I'm a normal size guy. And he wrote me a prescription for morphine pills, which is practically like heroin. And I didn't think anything of it because I was in pain. He literally told me that it was for sleeping, to help me sleep. And I was like, okay, sure. Like, I guess. So he's like, yeah, only take them when you're going to bed. I guess because he knew what the side effects were. And boy, did I find out what the side effects were. But he writes me a prescription. And then I go to the pharmacy to fill the prescription. And the pharmacist literally looks at me and he goes, I've never seen a doctor ever prescribe this many morphine pills at one time. And I was like, really? He goes, yeah, it's normally 10. He's giving you 25. And I was like, why? And he goes, I don't know. And I said, okay. So he filled the prescription. First couple nights, I take them. I am like hallucinating like crazy. I believe the first night, my entire room turned into Tetris blocks, and I was just watching Tetris happen. The second night, I got heartburn in the middle of the night, and I got up to grab some Tums off my dresser. And as I got up to reach, my room became a long hallway, and I could never grab the Tums. And so I kind of decided at that point, like, I'm done with these. I don't like them. Fast forward like a month later, and I was in the bathroom like doing something, and I like happened to look in the drawer where I'd put the pills, and I only had like 4 left. So I had subconsciously been taking morphine pills for an entire month, and I didn't even know. And I also don't even for sure know that I had a slip disc in my back, because I never got a proper examination, and now everything in my lower body is dog shit. But again, like, I wouldn't change anything because that match was awesome. But the funny thing about it is, like, so Scott, I mean, like, in wrestling, you're putting other people, their like safety in your hands, but it's never always going to be 100% certainty. And there was always kind of like, I guess, an unwritten rule kind of with like me and Dan and Kelly and Scott that like, we're going to be safe, and we're going to obviously protect each other because we need to, but also we're going to go a little bit harder and hit a little bit more for real because we're friends and because we don't want it to look like crap. So despite the fact that, that injury obviously happened and it was an accident, there was one time where I used to do this move that was Katsuyori Shibata does, like a knock the guy down in one corner on his butt and give him some really hard forearms, and then run to the opposite corner and then run and jump in the air and do like this massive drop kick to the seated opponent. And I'd done it like a million times, and Scott and I were having a match. I could probably tell you exactly when that match was. That match would have been... I mean, this is great audio. This match would have been... Good times for silence, right? Here we go. 2016. It would have been August 20th, 2016. So even though I've done it a million times, I've done it to Scott a million times, just like the way that he sat in the corner, and I think he was readjusting himself as I was running. And when I ran, he kind of like moved one of his legs, like rotated his hip in a little bit. And so when I did the drop kick like I normally do, his leg was just where my body would be landing. And so I landed on his knee. It kind of like hyperextended, I guess, like the wrong way. But again, like it's just this, accidental circumstance. Like it's not like I was aiming for his knee. And like for whatever reason, he would always like give me shit about it, like I did it on purpose, or just like that I was like intentionally dangerous. But I was like, it's the spot we've always done. And like when I watch it, because he said like when you watch the footage, like I come in on an angle, and I'm like, well, when I watch the footage, your leg comes in as I'm running. So like it's just an accidental happenstance, right? So I don't know, like that was just like a thing, is like he'd always give me shit for it, even though I'm like it was an accident that didn't that like I didn't run at your leg. But yeah, so I mean there was like that, and then he'd kind of become like a star, which I mean I'm not surprised at all. Like he was one of the biggest people and biggest draws at 321, and he was a big part of why people came to the show. And he won the title, and he was involved in one of our favorite botches of all time, which was he was defending the title against our friend Brett, who I love Brett, but he's not always the most athletic or coordinated person. And Scott was laying on a table outside the ring on the floor, and Brett was inside the ring on a ladder, and he tried to jump out to splash Scott on the table. And forgetting how physics works, and also because the referee wasn't really trained, nobody held the ladder. So when he jumped off the ladder, it kicked out, and Brett went straight to the floor between the ring and Scott laying on the table. And that was always one of our favorite memories, which Dan's girlfriend at the time caught on camera on her phone and then sent it to Dan. And then like every now and then Dan would just send it to me and I would show Scott it. That was always something that was a big highlight for us. And then, yeah, so he became kind of like a big deal. Like, to be honest, he was one of the first people to really like start selling merchandise at shows. He got a bunch of shirt designs made, and some of the early ones were fine. They were just sort of like text or words or font stuff, like just like on the front of shirts. It wasn't really anything as elaborate as what we got like later on as we kept going. But yeah, he was one of the first people to really have like actual proper merch. And he sold like a pretty good amount, but like he's a great salesman, right? Like he knows what he's doing. He's very good at pitching to people, and we always joke that he's like a grifter and a con man, but that's only partially true. And he really thrived. Like he really started to grow, and like you could see like he was spending a lot of his time and effort into like improving his like the visual look of the character, and getting entrance gear, and getting the boots with the original boots with the claws and the paws on them before he got like the good ones. And then he he was getting like more elaborate sort of like tiger costume and tiger stuff. And you're like, okay, like Scott's taking this very seriously. And like our paths would like, they would sort of cross a little bit here and there at wrestling, but like not as much. Like I was doing my own thing, he was doing his own thing. But like, we drive down to every single show together, and we would sometimes stay down and hang out the next day. And we had like certain places that we would always like to go to. There's this place in Seattle called the 5 Spot, which like if you get a chance to go, you can still go, but it's not the same as it used to be. What it used to be is that every time you would go, I think it was every 3 months, I believe, they would like rotate the menu of like a certain region of the United States. So it would be like Tornado Alley or Louisiana or Charleston, South Carolina, or like New Mexico or whatever. And so like the menu would be specific items from that region, which they would bring in the ingredients from that region. So they were like making them authentic. And we would like very much try to go and do that like whenever we could, because it was such it was like a cool experience to be like, I wonder what it is this time. But also just like the food was really good. But then I believe, if I'm not incorrect, it like had some troubles during the pandemic and it closed, and then maybe it wasn't opening and again, and then it opened, but it was like, we're just doing a standard menu now. Like we're not doing the kind of regional thing, which kind of sucked because we lost what we thought was really good. But there was like a coffee place like right near the venue that we would always go to. And like the one thing about Scott is, I guess you can call it thrifty, or you could call it cheap. But if like there was a place that was like a punch card or a collection of points per thing, or some kind of like buy 9 the 10th one's free, or something along those lines, like there's no chance in hell he's not getting those things. Like even if there was maybe like, let's say, a better option or a second option, but that place like didn't have a card system or a buy one get one free or like whatever it was, like we're always going to the one that has the get one free. And he had a card for this place near the wrestling venue that it was fine. Like it was a very like average, okay coffee place, but like every time we went, even if we had a coffee on the way down or an energy drink on the way down, he was going there to get his stamp because he was getting that free coffee at the end. There's no way he was missing out on something that he earned, he deserved, and it was his, and I'm getting that coffee. Same thing with like, there used to be these points cards. I mean, they still exist, but they're very different now. For the movie theater company in Canada, it's called Cineplex. And what it was, whenever you buy a ticket, you scan your card and it gives you points, and then you can use, or you buy food at the the concession or whatever, you get points. And then once you get those points, you can use those towards like free movies, or I guess at the time maybe it was free food. I don't know, but like that was something that was like brand new. And so, Kelly and I didn't have them because we didn't really care that much, but like he was so annoying about like getting in there and being like, whoa, 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 whoa. And then he would put his card in there and scan his card to get his points. And at a certain point, Kelly and I were just like, all right, I'm fucking done with giving him my free points. And then we intentionally got scene cards so that he wouldn't get our free points, because we would buy movies and then he would use the free points to get free movies that we were paying for. So we're like, not a fucking chance, buddy. You are cut off. So we got those cards specifically so that he couldn't use our free points to get free movies. And he would always use the free movies not with us. Like he would go to a movie with somebody else and he would use the points that he got for those movies, never the ones that we were going with. So it like, oh, like I'm paying too. I'm definitely paying for this movie. And then we're like, oh, okay, like, you know, but yeah, he was, if there was a free thing to be got, he's getting it. Yeah. So, 3-2-1 starts to take off. And we're getting pretty popular in the city, and shows are packed, you know, like to capacity, whatever capacity of that building was. Sometimes it felt like we were over capacity and we probably shouldn't have been running shows that many people. But, you know, like on average, I would say like 300 to 400 maybe. Some shows definitely got bigger than that. And the merch grew, and he wrote a book, but by wrote a book, I mean, he collected all of his old tweets and then got them made into a book by a guy he knew locally. And, that was the book. So there you go. He got, foam fingers and for free, or he paid very little for. He got cat tiger bandanas that he didn't pay for. He got, more shirts made, and he was like, like that was kind of like his main source of income for a while. He didn't get a job until he was in his early 30s. And I never really asked him about it because it's a weird subject to bring up. And I was never really certain if his parents were giving him money, or I never asked if he was paying rent. I never asked about bills and cars, and like I never asked about any of it because like I don't know. It's a weird subject to bring up, even if it is your best friend. It's just like, I don't need to know what your like living situation is. Like, it's kind of weird, but I mean, he didn't get a job until he was 29 or 30. And then he was done having a job by 35 or 36. Like he got a job at one of the telecommunications companies, doing internal and external sales, for a job he had no qualifications for, but luckily had family members who would make up fake credentials for him when people would call him and ask about his work history and his experience levels. But like, here's the infuriating thing about it. He had never had a job. He's 30 years old. He's never had a job. No one has ever paid him to do a job. And then he, fabricates and stretches the truth in order to get a job. And then he's just good at it. Even though he's never had the experience of doing anything in his life, he's just able to do it. And that was always something infuriating, is that like, he's very smart, or at least he used to very much thought he was the smartest man. But like, he was so capable of just doing something that you're like, oh fuck, he is smart. God damn it. Like, it would get me really annoyed. I was like, I just want him to fail at something, cause like he would put his mind to a lot of things and he could just do it. And I was like, fuck, just be bad at something. But I mean, that being said, he never learned how to ride a bike. So I don't know. I'm going to hold that against him for all the other things, of being an overachiever. But yeah, like he just kind of bullshitted his way into getting a good job. And then I just don't know the reasons. I don't know the reasons why he had to get a job. And I think the reason he didn't have a job, like why he left his job, was he was just done with working. Like I've done this for 5 years and I have had enough of it, and I will not be doing it again. So wrestling really did become like one of his major sources of income, and like I guess like his major grift, although it's not really grifting because he was doing the work. But like, yeah, he really I mean, I would love to be able to know the actual amount of like numbers of product moved and like what the dollar value was. Cause like, I don't know that there's, if there was ever a Guinness Book of World Records of a backyard wrestler who sold the most merchandise, or like low level professional wrestler that sold the most merchandise, I would probably venture to say he's like pretty high on that, if not the highest. For somebody who never wrestled on national television and never worked for a major company, he moved a lot of merchandise, and like not a lot of people can ever say that. So yeah, I would love to know like the actual numbers of how many shirts and bandanas and scarves and foam fingers and books and all the other garbage he sold. I'd love to know the actual numbers, but I'm probably never, like, I'll never be able to figure that out. But it's crazy. Like he's got a once in a lifetime like story, and that's just how he was. So, you know, I think we're at a good point here, because there's just a little bit more like of the wrestling stuff that I'll maybe start off with next episode. I didn't want to go too long. I was trying to keep it under 2 hours, but you know how we be on this podcast, that we can never go as short as we think we're going to go. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there, and I'll come back and I'll just finish off the wrestling in the next episode. And then we'll kind of go from there to like the rest of our life kind of together. But yeah, I hope this is good, and I hope people don't hate it, and I hope people actually listen to the whole thing. And I hope I'm doing everyone proud. And I just, I want to just keep the legacy going and keep the memory going. And I want to, I don't know. I hope this is worth it. I hope that people hear this, and I hope people like it. And I hope that I'm not just rambling about nothing, and I'm not just telling wrestling story that doesn't even matter to people. Like I hope you're happy. I hope you're all happy. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to me just talk and kind of get some stuff out of me, and then we'll see how the rest of this goes. Obviously this is the first episode. I'll do a second episode maybe next week. And then if you do like this and you are listening and you do want to be a part of it, please either send me a message on Twitter or Instagram. I got rid of Mastodon because I don't know, I was just having a thing where I was like, I'm going to delete everything. I don't want anything. But at Syrian Softpaws on things, and you can, if you have questions about something about him, or something about he and I, or something about just in general that you want to know about, or just even if you just want to like send me a statement or a nice thing or anything, or again, if you made art for me and I don't know who you are, please tell me what you drew for me. But if you have any of that stuff, I'll do a third episode where I kind of answer as many questions as I can, or the appropriate questions. And we'll just kind of see how this takes off. And, like, you can follow this channel if you want, or if you just want to listen to the 3 episodes and then go about your business, that is 100% okay. I do not mind that you're doing that. I know a lot of people were here for Scott, and on the Discord we're for Scott, and for the podcast we're for Scott. And so I totally 100% get it. And I'm not going to fault you for any of it. So if you want to subscribe and you want to follow along and see what I end up doing later down the line, that's fine. And I mean, I would be doing Scott a injustice if I didn't say paypal.me/SharonSoftpaws, or yeah. So I mean, feel free to hit me up, ask your questions, subscribe if you want, and if you don't want to do any of those things and you just want me to finish these two more podcasts and go away, and that's totally fine as well. So I hope you've enjoyed listening, and I hope you tune in for the next two, and I hope I get your feedback. And I'm gonna stop rambling and talking because nobody's here to tell me to stop except for myself, and I'm in charge here. I am the boss here. Good evening.